A single mom's baby cried on a plane, then a stranger did this. Hey everyone! Globe Showing Europe Africa Life has a way of bringing the right people into our paths at just the right moment, just like Olivia and Luke's unexpected connection. Sparkles, have you ever experienced a random act of kindness that changed your day? Drop a comment below and let us know where you're watching from. Round pushpin speech balloon. And don't forget, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications bell so you won't miss tomorrow's special story. Trust me, you won't want to miss this one. See you in the next tale. Rocket fire. Olivia had been dreading this day for weeks. Flying was already stressful enough, but flying alone with her 6-month-old son, Noah, felt like an impossible challenge. She had played out every possible worst-case scenario in her mind, hoping that, somehow, the flight would go smoothly. But deep down, she knew better. Noah had been fussy all week, and she could only pray that today wouldn't be one of those days. As she boarded the plane, juggling her diaper bag, carry-on, and a restless baby in her arms, she could feel the weight of judgmental eyes following her. She knew what people were thinking. Great, a baby on the plane. She tried to ignore the heavy sighs and the forced smiles of passengers who hoped they wouldn't be sitting near her. Taking a deep breath, Olivia settled into her window seat, cradling Noah close to her chest. For a moment, there was peace. The hum of the engine and the soft murmurs of passengers around her gave her a false sense of security. But as soon as the plane reached cruising altitude, the nightmare began. Noah's cries started as a soft whimper, barely noticeable. Olivia rocked him gently, whispering soothing words, hoping to calm him down before things escalated. But within seconds, the whimper turned into a full-blown scream, high-pitched, relentless, echoing through the cabin like an alarm no one could shut off. Heads turned. Brows furrowed. Passengers exchanged knowing glances. Panic bubbled up inside Olivia. She bounced Noah in her arms, shushing him gently. She tried everything, offering him a bottle, rubbing his back, even humming his favorite lullaby. Nothing worked. His tiny face was red with frustration, his little fists clenched as he wailed louder. She could feel the stares boring into her from every direction. The older woman across the aisle gave her a sympathetic smile, but the man in the row ahead let out an exaggerated sigh. Someone a few seats back muttered something under their breath. Olivia's cheeks burned with embarrassment. "I'm so sorry," she murmured, though she wasn't sure who she was apologizing to. The entire plane? The flight attendants? The businessman glaring at her over his laptop? She turned toward the window, willing herself to disappear into the clouds outside. She had never felt so helpless, so exposed. All she wanted was for Noah to stop crying, for just one person to understand how hard she was trying. But at that moment, she felt completely alone. Just when Olivia thought she couldn't take another second of the judgmental stares and the weight of exhaustion pressing down on her, a voice cut through the noise. "Mind if I try?" Startled, Olivia looked up. Standing in the aisle was a man she hadn't noticed before. He looked to be in his early 30s, with kind eyes and an easy, reassuring smile. He wore a simple button-down shirt and jeans, and something about his calm demeanor made her hesitate. For a moment, she just stared, unsure if she had even heard him correctly. "I'm Luke," he said, his voice steady but warm. "I've got 3 nieces. I might be able to help." Help? The word barely registered. Every instinct in Olivia's body screamed not to hand her baby to a stranger. That was rule number 1 of motherhood, wasn't it? But as she glanced down at Noah, his face red and scrunched in distress, his little fists still clenched, desperation overtook her hesitation. With trembling hands, She nodded and carefully passed Noah to Luke. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice barely audible over Noah's cries. Luke cradled Noah with practiced ease, shifting his weight slightly as if he had done this 100 times before. His large hands were surprisingly gentle as he supported Noah's tiny body. He didn't speak right away. Instead, he started humming, a low, soothing melody that seemed to vibrate in the air around them. Olivia held her breath, watching in disbelief as Luke swayed slightly, rocking Noah with effortless rhythm. At first, Noah continued crying, his little body stiff with frustration. But Luke didn't flinch. He simply kept humming, his deep voice steady and calm, as if he had all the time in the world. Then, something incredible happened. Noah's cries started to soften. His clenched fists slowly relaxed, his tiny chest rising and falling in a steadier rhythm. Luke transitioned from humming to singing, a lullaby Olivia didn't recognize, but something about it felt familiar, comforting. His voice was rich and warm, carrying through the cabin like a blanket of calm. Passengers who had previously been annoyed now watched in quiet amazement. A few even exchanged glances of relief. By the time Luke reached the end of the lullaby, Noah had completely stopped crying. His little head rested against Luke's chest, his tiny fingers curled into the fabric of Luke's shirt. His breathing was even, peaceful. Olivia felt a lump rise in her throat. She hadn't realized she was holding back tears until that moment. How did you do that?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Luke smiled, gently handing Noah back to her. "Sometimes, they just need a change of energy," he said simply. "You're doing great, by the way. Don't let anyone make you think otherwise." His words hit her harder than she expected. She had spent so much time feeling like she was failing, like she was barely keeping her head above water. But here was this stranger, someone who had no reason to say anything at all, telling her she was enough. Before she could respond, the flight attendant's voice crackled over the intercom, announcing upcoming turbulence. Luke gave her one last reassuring smile before heading back to his seat a few rows away. Olivia sat there, holding Noah close, her mind racing. She had no idea who Luke really was or why he had decided to help her, but one thing was certain, she would never forget it. Olivia sat frozen, holding Noah close, still trying to process what had just happened. The chaos of the last hour had completely drained her, but now, for the first time since the flight began, she felt an overwhelming sense of relief. Noah was asleep, his tiny body warm against her chest, his soft breath steady. She glanced over at Luke, who had returned to his seat a few rows back. He was leaning against the window, casually scrolling through his phone, as if what he had just done was nothing special. But to Olivia, it was everything. She wanted to thank him again, properly this time. Not just for calming Noah down, but for something deeper, reminding her that she wasn't alone. That despite how hard things felt, there were still kind people in the world. As the plane continued its course, the once tense atmosphere of the cabin had shifted. Passengers who had been annoyed before now looked at Olivia differently, not with judgment, but with something closer to understanding. The woman across the aisle gave her a small, approving nod. Even the businessman in the row ahead seemed to have softened, no longer glaring over his laptop. Olivia let out a slow breath, finally allowing herself to relax. She leaned her head against the window, watching the endless stretch of clouds below. For the rest of the flight, she replayed Luke's words in her mind. "You're doing great. Don't let anyone make you think otherwise." It had been so long since anyone had said something like that to her. Being a single mom was isolating. Every day felt like a test, a constant struggle to prove that she could handle it all on her own. But for once, she didn't feel like she had to. When the flight attendant announced their descent, Olivia carefully adjusted Noah in her arms, making sure not to wake him. The exhaustion was hitting her now, but mixed with it was a strange sense of warmth. As the plane touched down and the passengers began gathering their things, Olivia craned her neck to look for Luke. She wanted to say something, anything, to let him know how much his kindness had meant to her. But as soon as she stood up, she realized he was already moving. Through the small gaps between passengers, she caught sight of him walking up the aisle, his back turned toward her. He moved with an easy confidence, weaving through the crowd with practiced ease. "Wait," she mumbled under her breath, but her voice barely carried over the noise of people shuffling out of their seats. And just like that, he was gone. By the time she made it into the jet bridge, there was no sign of him. No chance to stop him. No chance to say thank you. She stood there for a moment, gripping the strap of her diaper bag, feeling an odd mix of disappointment and wonder. Who was he? Why had he helped her? And why did she feel like she had just lost something important before she even had the chance to understand it? As she stepped into the airport terminal, the sounds of baggage wheels rolling and airport announcements crackling overhead, she held Noah a little closer. She didn't know Luke's last name. She didn't know where he was headed. But one thing was certain, she would never forget him. The ride home was quiet. Olivia sat in the back seat of the taxi, staring out the window as the city lights blurred past. Noah was fast asleep in his car seat, his little face peaceful, completely unaware of the emotions swirling inside her. She should have been exhausted. The flight had drained her, and all she wanted was to get home, take a hot shower, and collapse into bed. But instead, her mind kept circling back to one thing: Luke. Who was he? Why had he helped her so effortlessly, as if it was the most natural thing in the world? And why did it bother her so much that he had disappeared before she could thank him properly? Her phone buzzed, pulling her out of her thoughts. It was a text from her best friend, Jessica. "Jessica, how was the flight? Survive?" Olivia let out a small laugh, shaking her head. "Barely. But a stranger saved the day. Long story. Tell you later." She hesitated before hitting send. Somehow, summing up what had happened in just a few words felt wrong. The moment had meant more than that. By the time she got home, the exhaustion had finally caught up with her. She went through the motions of putting Noah to bed, unpacking just enough to grab her essentials, and then collapsing onto the couch. But even as she closed her eyes, her mind refused to let go of Luke. Over the next few days, she found herself thinking about him at the most random moments, while rocking Noah to sleep, while making her morning coffee, even while answering emails for work. It was ridiculous, really. He was just a stranger on a plane, someone she had shared a brief moment with. Nothing more. At least, that's what she kept telling herself. Jessica, of course, had a different opinion. "Okay, spill," Jessica demanded as soon as she walked into Olivia's apartment that weekend, a bag of pastries in one hand and a determined look on her face. "Who's this mystery guy who saved you on the plane?" Olivia rolled her eyes but couldn't help smiling. His name was Luke. He was just kind. The kind of kind that makes you believe in humanity again. He sang to Noah, and somehow, it worked. "I don't even know how." Jessica raised an eyebrow. "And let me guess, he was cute, too?" Olivia felt her face flush. "I mean, yeah, I guess. But it wasn't like that. He was just helpful. And then he was gone." Jessica leaned forward, eyes narrowing. You should try to find him. Olivia scoffed. This isn't a movie, Jess. He was just a nice guy on a plane. End of story. But even as she said it, a small voice in the back of her mind whispered, what if it wasn't? A week had passed, but Olivia still couldn't shake the thought of Luke. No matter how many times she told herself it was just a fleeting moment, a stranger's act of kindness on a plane, something about it lingered. It wasn't just the way he had calmed Noah so effortlessly or how his words had reassured her when she needed them most. It was the way he had disappeared before she could even say thank you. Jessica hadn't let it go either. Every time they talked, she found a way to bring him up, teasing Olivia that this was her meet-cute, her rom-com moment. Olivia laughed it off, insisting it was nothing. But deep down, she wondered, what if Jessica was right? That Saturday morning, Olivia decided to take Noah to the park. The sun was finally shining after a week of gloomy weather, and she figured some fresh air would do them both good. She settled onto a bench, watching Noah play with his toy truck in the grass. Families walked by, joggers passed, and the laughter of children filled the air. It was peaceful. Until she heard a familiar voice. Hey, it's you. Her heart nearly stopped. She turned her head, and there he was, Luke. Standing just a few feet away, holding a coffee in one hand and a leash in the other. At the end of the leash, a golden retriever wagged its tail excitedly. For a moment, Olivia was too stunned to speak. She blinked, half convinced she was imagining things. Luke, she finally said, her voice tinged with disbelief. He grinned, stepping closer. Didn't think I'd see you again. Small world, huh? She let out a breathless laugh, still trying to process it. Yeah, I guess so. She glanced at the dog. And who's this? This is Max, Luke said, patting the retriever's head. He keeps me busy. Olivia smiled, feeling an odd sense of warmth spread through her chest. Well, Noah definitely keeps me busy too. Luke's gaze softened as he looked down at Noah, who was now babbling to himself, completely oblivious to the moment unfolding. He looks happy, Luke said. Thanks to you, Olivia admitted. I never got to properly thank you, by the way. You really saved me on that flight. Luke shrugged, his smile easy and genuine. Happy to help. Babies can be tough, but I've had some practice. They stood there for a beat, the conversation flowing effortlessly. Olivia found herself telling Luke about her work as a freelance designer, her love-hate relationship with coffee, and how Noah had turned her world upside down in the best way possible. Luke told her about his job as a music teacher and how he had been visiting family when they met on the plane. And then, just before they parted ways, he hesitated. I know this might be a little forward, but would you want to grab coffee sometime? Or maybe a playdate, Noah and Max? Olivia felt something she hadn't allowed herself to feel in a long time. Hope. She smiled. I'd like that. Life has a funny way of bringing people together, doesn't it? Olivia never expected that a stressful flight with her crying baby would lead to a life-changing moment with a complete stranger. But fate had other plans. Now, I want to hear from you. Have you ever experienced a moment like this, where a stranger's kindness completely turned your day around? Maybe someone stepped in at just the right time, or you had an unexpected connection that stuck with you long after? Tell us your story in the comments below. And here's another question. Do you believe in fate? Was Olivia and Luke's reunion at the park just a coincidence, or was it something more? Let's talk about it. Drop your thoughts in the comments. And if you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel. We have more heartwarming and unexpected stories coming your way, and you won't want to miss the next one. See you in the comments.